The long-simmering shadow war between Iran and Israel has spilled into the open, marking a perilous new chapter for the Middle East. Tensions, already high since the events of October 7, 2023, reached a critical point in late 2024. A series of Israeli strikes targeting high-value Iranian and allied assets in Syria and Lebanon provoked a direct response from Tehran. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei declared that these Israeli actions were, quote, too large to ignore, signaling a significant shift in strategy. The conflict was no longer confined to clandestine operations and proxy battles. It was now a direct state-on-state confrontation, pulling the entire region closer to the brink of a much wider, more devastating war. This shift was underscored by Iran's extensive preparations for retaliation. For the first time, plans reportedly involved not just the elite Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, but also Iran's conventional military, the Artesh. This unprecedented collaboration was seen as a direct response to the killing of 4 Artesh officers in one of the Israeli strikes. Intelligence reports from late 2024 detailed preparations for a complex, multi-pronged assault involving media group, drone launch from Iranian military base, swarm of military drones in flight, control room monitoring drone operation at distribute equally, a barrage of drones, and advanced ballistic missiles. The intention was clear, to demonstrate a new level of capability and resolve, and to impose a heavy price on Israel for its military actions, fundamentally altering the established rules of engagement. The situation reached its zenith on June 13, 2025. Israel, citing intelligence of an imminent and massive Iranian attack on its civilian centers, launched what it termed a preemptive strike against targets inside Iran. The Israeli defense minister announced the operation was a defensive necessity, a difficult but unavoidable choice made to protect its population. This dramatic move followed weeks of escalating rhetoric and military posturing. The strike represented a profound gamble, crossing a red line that both nations had cautiously avoided for decades. It instantly placed the region on its highest state of alert, with the world watching and waiting for Iran's inevitable and potentially overwhelming response to the direct attack on its sovereign territory. The backdrop to this direct military clash was the nearly 600-day war in Gaza, which had severely eroded Israel's international standing. By June 2025, diplomatic support had dwindled, as evidenced by a United Nations vote just a day before the strike, which overwhelmingly called for a ceasefire. This political isolation may have factored into Israel's strategic calculus, perhaps believing it had little more to lose on the diplomatic front. The preemptive strike, therefore, was not just a military action, but a stark declaration that, with or without international backing, Israel would act unilaterally to counter what it perceived as an existential threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran's response to Israeli pressure has been amplified through its extensive network of allied militias, often referred to as the Axis of Resistance. Throughout late 2024 and into 2025, these groups relentlessly targeted Israel from multiple fronts, showcasing their strategic importance to Tehran. In Lebanon, despite significant losses and the seizure of vast weapon caches by the Israeli Defense Forces, Hezbollah continued its daily barrage of rocket and drone attacks into northern Israel. Similarly, the Islamic Resistance of Iraq, a coalition of Iranian-backed militias, claimed responsibility for numerous drone strikes on vital Israeli targets, including the port city of Haifa, vowing wider escalation if provoked further. From the south, the Houthi movement in Yemen maintained its campaign against international shipping in the Red Sea. Having launched over 270 attacks, they demonstrated a persistent ability to disrupt global trade and expand the conflict's geographic scope. These coordinated actions by Iran's proxies serve a dual purpose. They bog down Israeli military resources and create a constant low-level war of attrition, all while providing Tehran with a degree of plausible deniability. This strategy aims to encircle Israel, stretching its advanced air defense systems and forcing its military to fight on several fronts simultaneously, a long-held fear of Israeli strategic planners. The escalation also brought new and more formidable weaponry into the spotlight. Reports in late 2024 suggested that Iran was preparing to deploy advanced missiles with heavier payloads, specifically mentioning the Khorramshahr 4. This medium-range ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers and the capacity to carry a 1,500-kilogram warhead represents a significant upgrade in Iran's offensive arsenal. The potential use of such weapons in a retaliatory strike signaled Iran's willingness to inflict far greater damage than in previous exchanges, moving beyond symbolic gestures to actions with devastating destructive potential, thereby raising the stakes for any future conflict. Israel's preemptive strike in June 2025 was a direct reaction to the threat posed by this evolving arsenal and coordinated strategy. The Israeli military aimed to neutralize these capabilities before they could be unleashed. However, this action has now created a new and more dangerous reality. By striking Iranian soil directly, Israel has crossed a threshold, potentially triggering a cycle of retaliation that could see these advanced weapons used not as a deterrent, but as instruments in an open war. The region now holds its breath, uncertain if the preemptive blow has averted a crisis or simply ignited a far larger one that will be difficult for anyone to control. The escalating conflict has sent shockwaves far beyond the Middle East, forcing international powers to navigate a treacherous diplomatic landscape. The United States, under the Trump administration, found itself in a delicate position. President Trump had been pursuing a diplomatic track to curb Iran's nuclear program but simultaneously maintained a strong alliance with Israel. His preference for de-escalation was clear when he warned Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu against an attack just 2 weeks before the June 2025 strike. The Israeli action taken despite this caution highlighted the limits of American influence when its key ally perceives an imminent existential threat, complicating U.S. efforts to prevent a regional conflagration. In the days leading up to the Israeli strike, the U.S. took precautionary measures, withdrawing diplomatic personnel from Iraq and authorizing the voluntary departure of military families from several countries in the region. These actions underscored the grave assessment of the threat level. Gulf Arab states, who had hosted President Trump in May 2025, watched with deep apprehension. While these nations share Israel's concerns about Iranian influence, their primary desire is for regional stability. They look to Washington to act as a restraining force, hoping American diplomacy could pull both sides back from the brink and prevent a conflict that would inevitably destabilize their own economies and security. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime is not only managing an external crisis, but also contending with significant internal pressure. The country has been rocked by persistent anti-government protests, often spearheaded by women demanding greater freedoms. The case of Ahu Darii in late 2024 became a powerful symbol of this defiance. A student who protested the mandatory hijab laws after being harassed by security forces, her subsequent arrest, and the state's attempt to discredit her by claiming mental illness only fueled public anger. This domestic unrest represents a critical vulnerability for the government in Tehran. This internal fragility adds another layer of complexity to Iran's strategic calculations. The regime must project strength and retaliate against Israel to satisfy its hardline base and maintain its credibility within the axis of resistance. However, a full-scale war could exacerbate economic hardships and potentially galvanize the protest movement into a broader uprising. The leadership in Tehran is therefore walking a tightrope, balancing the need to respond to external aggression with the imperative of preventing a collapse of social order at home, a balancing act that makes its next moves dangerously unpredictable. Looming over the entire conflict is the specter of Iran's nuclear program. In response to international condemnation and military pressure, Iranian officials have issued increasingly bold statements, hinting at a potential shift in their long-standing nuclear doctrine. Supreme Leader Khamenei's vow in late 2024 to take, quote, every necessary military, weapon and political action was interpreted by some analysts as a signal that the regime might be reconsidering its fatwa, or religious edict, that forbids the development of nuclear weapons. This rhetoric serves as a powerful form of leverage, a stark warning to the world of the ultimate consequences, should Iran feel its survival is threatened. These threats have intensified in 2025. Following an IAEA resolution condemning its activities, Iran openly discussed the possibility of withdrawing from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. While many diplomats view these statements as posturing designed to gain concessions in negotiations, the risk remains that they could become policy. The direct Israeli strike on Iranian territory could be the very trigger that pushes hardliners in Tehran to argue that only a nuclear deterrent can guarantee the nation's security against future attacks. This creates a dangerous paradox where actions meant to disarm Iran could instead accelerate its path toward acquiring the ultimate weapon. The recent escalation between Iran and Israel has thus pushed the Middle East into its most volatile period in decades. The cycle of strikes and counterstrikes has shattered the unwritten rules of their shadow war, making the prospect of a direct, sustained military conflict more real than ever. The involvement of heavily armed proxies like Hezbollah and the Houthis ensures that any such war would not be contained, but would rapidly spread across the region, threatening global energy supplies, trade routes, and international security. The stability of the entire global order is now tied to the decisions being made in Tehran and Tel Aviv. In conclusion, the events of the past several months serve as a grave reminder of how quickly long-standing rivalries can escalate into open hostilities. The combination of direct military strikes, the mobilization of powerful proxy forces, mounting domestic pressures, and the ever-present nuclear question has created a situation fraught with peril. The path to de-escalation is narrow and requires immediate, intensive diplomacy. Without a concerted effort to restore deterrence and open channels for communication, the Middle East risks descending into a catastrophic conflict, the consequences of which would be felt across the entire world for years to come.